Thanks very much, Shane. Now to Lee Morgan. Lee is the Manager Remote Communities for Power and Water, a position he's held for 2 years here in Alice Springs. Prior to that, he was the Manager Infrastructure of Aboriginal Communities within the Department of Premier and Cabinet in South Australia. So, as they say in this part of the world, he's worked above and below the border. He was previously with the South Australian Water Corporation for 20 years in the South Australian Environmental Protection Authority. He's speaking today on training and employment of Indigenous people in remote communities. We'll make him welcome, please, Lee Morgan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Alice Springs, and I also pay my respects for the Remate people which we reside on today, past and present. How many people the first time they've been to Alice Springs, by the way? Fantastic, yeah. So despite all the negative publicity, it's a wonderful town, and I think it's just probably give it a bit of perspective. We've got about 20% Indigenous people in Alice Springs. We also have people from all over the world, and it's if you have the opportunity to get out to around the town, you'll meet Americans. A lot of them are gardeners out at the Pine Base at Pine Gap. We also have a number of traditional Australian people. We have people from Taiwan and people from the Philippines. We have people from Europe. So it's an actual salad bowl of different people, and it's actually a wonderful microcosm of what Australia really is. And it's certainly an opportunity for the practitioners in this part of the world, the opportunity for multiculturalism and to help in assistant training. So, it's great that you are here, and if you are here, try and get out to the Inland Way, out to Ellery Gap and so on. And also have a look at the Royal Flying Doctor Service and so forth, because it is a wonderful town, and I welcome you. On the note of remote communities, Shane mentioned about the Accessibility Remoteness Index of Australia, the remote communities. How many people have been to a remote community? Just a few. That's good. So roughly about 30 to 40% maybe of the audience. I think it's important that we really understand what a remote community is. There's none in Tasmania, there's none in Victoria, there's a few in New South Wales, there's a couple in Queensland, there's about 72 in Northern Territory, and West Australia they have far more. Plus we've got smaller homelands in around the Territory. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So my presentation today is about Indigenous programs and remote areas initiatives for the Power and Water Corporation. I'm going to provide a bit of a context on the Northern Territory, a bit of an overview about remote operations within Power and Water, our governance, how we work within Power and Water Corporation, the overview of our programs, and most importantly, the Indigenous employment and training initiatives and a summary of that. So just a little bit about the demographics of Northern Territory. It's not well understood sometimes, but based on the recent Bureau of Statistics demographics, our population is about 230,000 people. So, that puts it into perspective, of which 50% of those live in the Darwin or the Darwin area. So basically, if you do your maths, 115,000 people are spread over the remaining part of the territory. So it's a big, expansive bit of land, very remote, and of which it's 1% of our total population, and it has increased by 17% in 10 years. But it has the third fastest growth of all the states and territories. But our population, most importantly, is 56,000. So of the 115,000, 56,000 people, Indigenous people, reside over the Northern Territory. So we, as people of the Territory, are really quite justified, and it's important that we encourage Indigenous employment, because there's not much point in having non-Indigenous people managing remote communities, water supplies and power supplies. So it's very important. That's why it's to the heart of the problem in what we do here with Power and Water. So a few things have happened over the last few years following the intervention that occurred in the election prior to 2007. We have the Closing the Gap. We have a Territory 2030 strategy. We have the Northern Territory Government Working Futures, and that may change now with the newer government. There's a Stronger Futures program by the Australian Government. We have a national partnership agreements for remote service delivery, and we have national partnerships for Indigenous housing. All of these programs, we have to meet the services, expanding services of new clinics, new schools, new stores, and so on. And that means expanded electricity supplies, water supplies. It means a great level of emphasis on developing our infrastructure in these communities. So remote operations. Remote operations basically has a project management approach. We are funded by the Northern Territory Government to provide our services. We work within the Power and Water Corporation, but we are a single business unit within the Power and Water Corporation providing the remote services to 72 odd communities. And we provide electricity supply, we manage energy and water services, and we do that in a safe and constructive manner. So we have about 4 offices, one in Darwin, that's our major head office. We have a Katherine office, a small Tennant Creek office, and we have about 28 people here in Alice Springs. We have subsections including electricity, mechanical services, water supply, sewage services, water quality, community water planning, renewable energy. Alice Springs is famous for its Solar Cities program, and I'm sure you've seen that on your short visit here. And of course, community liaison and planning. So we put that into a bit of perspective. We have we are part of the Indigenous Essential Services Proprietary Limited within the Power and Water Corporation. We have 20 growth towns out of the 72 communities where we are expanding our services. We have, and we have 52 other communities that we provide power, water, and wastewater services. And we do that in an integrated way. It is a vertical slice. Not only is it from the power generation down to the retailer, but we provide power, water and wastewater and all the retail services associated with that. And indeed, our population of our communities ranges from 100 people up to 3,000 people up at Wadeye. Just a bit of an idea of funding, and it'll be a very quick slide, this one. We have about $85 million budget each year for those 72 communities, and of which nearly a third of our budget is based on distillate in power generation. Just a quick overview of the water services. We have the bores that supply the community. We have disinfection units on our water supplies. We have storages, and the water is reticulated. On our wastewater services, the wastewater is collected, and it is then pumped, and we have anaerobic treatment lagoons, and then we have some reuse and programs where it is after treatment in an anaerobic situation is then irrigated out onto land. We have safe drinking. In relation to safe drinking, the water quality is extremely important. We have monthly tests of our water sampling of all our reticulated services, which means flights to all communities and having a check for microbiological factors and chemical characteristics. And basically, we also have got to be mindful of the sustainability of our water supplies, ensuring that the water is available for our future generations. And in relation to power supply, we have 177 generators, and we, as I said, $32 million worth of fuel, 30 million, which equates to about 30 million litres, plus our 6 solar plants. and indeed, our associated above-ground electricity networks, and we also very mindful of electricity efficiency and safety. So as far as our essential services operators are concerned, the diesel has to be delivered, so we have to have oversight of that. We have to have where our diesel is used to generate the electricity, and obviously there's protocols and maintenance of the diesel generation plant. In some of the communities we have renewable energy facilities, and the integration of that into the power supply is a key issue. And then we have the reticulation, and we have then the retailing, which we do have a prepaid system for households. Just a very quick oversight of our renewable energy profile. We have about a megawatt of renewable energy systems, of which we've got one at Tea Tree, 324 kilowatts. It's just been commissioned. Another one that's just been commissioned last week at Lake Nash for 266 kilowatts, and another one about 402 kilowatts being commissioned at Calcringy in late November. And that's all, it's not just easy as just getting out your solar plants. To actually have that integration with your electricity systems is a real key dilemma, particularly when you've got small variable demands in a small community. And of course we have our concentrated photovoltaic systems at Hermannsburg, Calcringy, and Yuendamu and Largemere, I should say, which have been taken over from solar systems, so we own that infrastructure. So other utility functions, we deal with the retail prepayment meters, as I mentioned. The logistics of fuel is very extreme, covering this big wide area of Australia. Our development responses, due to the growth towns, has increased from 100 in 2006, and now we're dealing with about 600 development applications each year for our communities. So we're having expanding development that's placing greater stress on our headworks for power supplies, water supplies, and so on. We have greater legislative and regulatory reporting that we have to meet. The EPA has just been established in the Territory. We've had to meet environmental requirements for a long time. Our water and energy efficiency, is a major emphasis on our business at the moment. When it costs 51 cents a kilowatt hour to produce, and we're charging 21 cents a kilowatt hour, it's not a great business sense. So obviously we have been, we are reliant on government funding to subsidise the services to remote communities. But we also have to save funds, and also the way that how we deliver our business. We're very reliant on SCADA, and I'll talk briefly about that. And also we have obviously a capital program to redevelop our water storages, our bores, our electricity plants, and our reticulation systems. So how do we provide those services? We have we need that technical expertise. What we do as far as our services are concerned is having technical coordinators based in each office, and they're the ones that exceed our Certificate 3 level of qualification. They're the ones that are very skilled, but we need people on the ground. And obviously we need people on the ground that come from the community, and that's where we have put a lot of effort and time into our Essential Services Operators program. So they've got to be appropriately trained and inducted no matter where they are. We have a routine maintenance program where we are maintaining our power, water and wastewater services, and we do that in a way where it's integrated across the Territory. So our SCADA system, and I think that's very important, that a lot of people don't sort of understand this, that this is an area that we are very proud of, that we have local systems, collection systems of our data through RTU, and then we have to move that data through various means, either through ADSL, often through satellite, or through optical fibre, back to a central database which is located in Darwin, and that information is then provided to our technical coordinators. We can tell if the community is running out of water. We can observe how much power and what the demand is in each community at a screen by a technical coordinator who can then liaise with the essential services operator about what the actual problem is. So our essential services operators, they maintain vital services to the 72 communities, as I've mentioned. What we do, we contract out that work though. We just don't employ them straight from Power and Water. It's done through a contract system, either with the local shire or with an Aboriginal community organisation. And we do that in a way where the ESO is able to communicate effectively with us, and that we work that on a development and training model. And the reason why we focus on that Indigenous employment is because of local employment, obviously. And as Shane mentioned earlier, you know, they are people that can be held up in high esteem in the community, and they can you know, they can maintain our assets. It's better for our assets to be maintained on a daily basis instead of us reacting to problems and having contractors fly in, fly out all the time. And of course, it promotes regional development. So we currently employ about 140 ESOs through the contract, well, the shires do, and that equates to about 37% of them are Indigenous. So we have about 52 Indigenous people being employed in communities across the territory doing the essential services operator work. And we emphasise a career model. It's not just that they're there. There may be other opportunities for employment, and I'll talk about that in a second. What we've done is we have encouraged, through the contracts, a Certificate 2 training program where it's been a real big challenge, of course, to have Indigenous people undertake training through the 6 units throughout the year, where they undertake that training both in Alice Springs or in Katherine or out in the community. And we're trying to ensure that they meet that national qualification, but with the view eventually of reaching a Certificate 3. So what we've done is 12 months ago, we basically had ESOs that had to have a Certificate 2 qualification. Some didn't have any qualification at all. But what we've done is set up a matrix about what are the prerequisites for a ESO, an advanced ESO, a trainee, and indeed for a supervisor. So we've worked that in towards into our contracts, and basic things like a white card for the trainee, site inductions, and obviously, as we've talked about and it's been mentioned earlier, you know, having a mentor within our contracts, and indeed the prerequisite qualifications. Here's a concept where we have looked at the school level, and it really starts back at the secondary school, year 11, year 12, about having numeracy and literacy skills, then building up into that maybe a Cert 2, a Cert 1 accreditation if necessary, about having those numeracy and literacy skills to actually be employable, have that communication skills for answering the telephone, writing the right data in for the reporting sheets, and then moving on towards the ESO, and indeed ultimately getting on to a Certificate 3 where they could be employable within a utility or in the mining sector. So we're creating a career path for Indigenous people based from the community. This diagram gives you a bit of an indication that we've got funding that's provided by Power and Water through the federal government and also through the Northern Territory government, and indeed having a certificate in generation, and working in partnership with the likes of Charles Darwin University, GTNT, Group Training NT, and Power and Water and the Shires, and developing either an apprenticeship program or a trainee program for these people. So our objective is to not only go from the 37% Indigenous employment, but we're hoping to get to 60% by 2020, and we want to improve our skill levels with at least 50% of our ESO workforce holding Certificate 2 or 3 qualification within the next 12 months, and improving our supervision of the ESOs through mentoring and building that into our contracts. And the timeframes for that is 40% within the next year, and the 140 ESOs, of which 40 are in the north, 32 in the middle part of the NT, and 68 within Central Australia. And next year we've got some competition with our ESO contracts, so it's not just going to be to the shires but to Indigenous corporations. We are certainly looking at the realignment of the training, where instead of the Certificate 2 in electrotechnology, transferring that to the the certificate in generation, and also the skilling up of our essential services operators. And then 2014, moving towards a Certificate 2 and 3 in water operations, and at least 50% of our ESOs holding the Certificate 2 qualification, and moving towards then the Certificate 3 for some of the others. So in summary, we provide electricity, water and sanitation services for the whole of the territory. We have an emphasis on our career path. A lot of that's done through contracts and agreements, and indeed, we partner with the educational organisations and training institutions, and we work with the government departments in doing so. Thank you very much.